Blizzard has released their February update for Diablo 4, and of course, we're going to take a deep dive and find out exactly what's in this thing. So without further ado, let's get into it. Now, there's actually a lot in this post, and I do love the fact that they're giving us, you know, pretty frequent updates on Diablo 4 and their design process and just the process in general. I feel like Blizzard's maybe turning over a new leaf of at least being transparent on what they're working on, even if most times we may or may not like it. I still think it's a positive thing. So before we dissect some of the stuff we see in this post, I want to kind of touch on like the absolute positive. So first they kind of show off this new, what they're calling families, which is like monster families in Diablo 4. And they're showing off like more of the engine, which again, I've said 1,000 million great things about the engine for this game. It looks fantastic. Playing it at BlizzCon, the game looked and felt really cool. Like it's very dark and it's clearly what people wanted. I mean, there's literally skulls everywhere in this little clip. The guys are covered in blood. People love that in the Diablo universe. And they do look cool. They look menacing. And, you know, again, it shows off the graphics. The graphics for this game look fantastic. I think, you know, overall, we all agree game looks great. And so they're showing us more of it. And I do love these little updates. I honestly think that even if Blizzard just gave us, you know, even like a weekly concept art picture like this, like it would be pretty juicy. Just a little, you know, morsel of information that we can look at on a frequent basis. Then they go on to talk about how in Diablo 3, they had monster categories like demon, unholy, undead, humanoid, wildlife. You know, honestly, like I've been playing Diablo 3 for years and years and years. And I don't know, outside of like maybe a couple items that like the monster category really matters at all. So I'm curious what their approach is with the whole monster family idea. If there's going to be, you know, attributes that give damage to a certain monster family or defense versus a certain monster family. If they did that, I don't know how I feel about that. Like having to swap out gear all the time based on the type of mobs that you're fighting. I don't know. Is that fun? I guess it'd be okay if they had something like the armory from Diablo 3 where it was easy to swap out gear sets. But again, I just don't know that that's necessarily a fun play style. But couldn't be happier with, you know, how these looks are turning out. The art team is doing some insane stuff. It's super dark. People love it. And they go on to show some of like the animations of these guys like swinging their sword, and it just looks good, man. I couldn't be happier with how this game is looking. The only thing I will say is, you know, as they design out these enemies, you know, I feel like they did a decent job in Diablo 3 of designing the enemies, but then like in practice, some of the enemies just turned out to be like very not fun. You know, like in Diablo 3, there's like tongue lashers, the spear throwers, Lacuni prowlers, where they have these mechanics that they're cool, but they become like undodgeable in their practice. So like, for example, spear throwers in Diablo 3, like they rear back to throw their spear, and the spear does like even more damage than the Rift Guardian. But they pull back to throw their spear, and then as you move throughout the screen, they kind of like pivot like a turret, right? Instead of just being like locking themselves into the animation. So I hope that like all of that is considered so that, you know, players can effectively dodge and mitigate, you know, kind of be in control of the battle and kind of mitigate and micromanage all the mob types that are around them and know what they do and effectively master like a mob type instead of being like, well, I got tongue lashers, therefore if I like fight more than 10, I'm just going to die. And then, you know, there's certain things like, you know, Diablo 3 has a Rift Guardian called Cold Snap, and one of his abilities, he just ports to you without any kind of tell whatsoever and one-shots your character and you just die. Diablo 3 has what's called like cheat deaths, which I'm still not sure is a fun mechanic, but it prevents you from dying to stuff that like you could do nothing about, which is nice. So I hope those things are being considered in this iteration of Diablo. But I do like all the things I'm seeing here. And so they go on to talk about inventory and how there was some feedback at BlizzCon of maybe the icons not really looking very impressive. And so now they're designing them based on the 3D models to make them look better. And I've seen some feedback on this, and overall the feedback is positive, and I'll say like, okay, cool. But then at the end of the day, like, why does it really matter? So, you know, this is an icon for my pestilence gloves, right? The way it looks. How much time do you really want them to spend on something like this? Okay, so I get the item, I see the icon artwork, I put it on my character, and I close out my inventory and like never see it again. So like you see this icon maybe like what, 3% of your playtime? I don't know. I think there's bigger things to gripe about than item icons. I mean, I would argue that ultimately you're not even really looking at the art. So for example, Diablo 3, at a certain point, you're just like looking at your colors, like, oh, am I fully legendary? Am I all orange, or am I all green and orange? Do I have a red border? And, you know, is it a primal? Do I have an orange border? Is it a ancient? And the art kind of over time is meaningless. And then the same kind of holds true for Path of Exile. So on the surface, you wouldn't see like, oh, I'm wearing a unique chest in Path of Exile. But then Path of Exile does things like, you know, this is a hunter glove, and so it's kind of glowing green. And this is a warlord claw, so it's kind of glowing like a fiery yellow. And then my boots are hunter and elder, and so they're like, get this really weird like foil effect going on. It's kind of like that. Like, you know, you get like a card in these famous TCG games, and they kind of like glow. I think that there's power in that. And so while you might not pay attention to the artwork itself, you're definitely going to pay attention to like that background, or maybe if the art item is glowing or has a foil effect to it. And I think those are the kinds of things that pique maybe more interest aesthetically than just like the artwork itself. Now, they also touched on how basically every item is going to take on the same amount of inventory space. Now, I've heard arguments for both. You know, they argue that it's more immersive if, you know, a big two-hander takes up a ton of inventory space, and a ring is just like this tiny little thing, so it should only take up like one little socket. And what that does is it makes you end up having to play inventory Tetris, basically. And some people view this negatively, and some people view this very positively. And maybe I'm not the best person to ask because I'm somewhere in the middle. But I'm curious, like maybe they should do like a poll. Maybe they should really ask for the community feedback instead of just being like, you know what? We don't like inventory management, so let's not do that. So they show us this new inventory screen, and I gotta say, one, like, I don't feel like the colors really pop enough. If I like squint a little bit or imagine this on my character, like it's kind of difficult to tell the background colors. They don't really like pop that much. And I also don't love that they're so small. And I don't know that I love like the character standing there being like the centerpiece of your inventory screen. Like your inventory screen is to see your items. It's not to see your character. If they wanted, they could do their own special screen, you know, and Wilson does kind of the same thing. We get your inventory, there's no character in there. And what I think that maybe Diablo 4 could take from Wilson, you know, instead of showing your actual character on your character sheet and just taking up valuable space, you know, one, obviously you see your character right next to your inventory, so I think it's unnecessary. But two, Wilson has this thing where you basically have this cosmetic management screen, which is solely dedicated to exactly how your character looks. I think that that's the better play instead of having your character inside of your inventory. And they don't necessarily need to reinvent the wheel here, right? Like you open up your inventory in PoE, those are your items. You open up your inventory in Diablo 3, those are your items. This all works. We don't have to do like the World of Warcraft style, look at myself in my character screen, because like your character's right here, right? Like your character's right next to your inventory. So if you put on an item, you're going to see, you know, the change happens in real time. You know, the bigger part about seeing this particular inventory screen is we get another look at, you know, attack defense. And I feel like there's been a lot of feedback that, you know, people don't necessarily love the simplicity of attack defense life. That's seemingly too basic. Now, I hope that this is just their way of calculating between all of your gear, and maybe as gear gets more complicated, it's just really just a DPS score. Much like in PoE, like where if you hover over your main skill, it's like, okay, 24,562 DPS on my Venom Gyre. But this is where it kind of gets sticky in PoE because, you know, my Venom Gyre is doing 24,562 DPS, but that's not accurate whatsoever because PoE, your sheet isn't factoring in poison damage and blah, blah, blah. And I don't think that that makes for very easy to understand gameplay. So I'm hoping that attack is just a representation, their best way of calculating your actual damage. And I hope there's not a whole lot of behind the scenes, or you have to go use like third-party programs to be like, like what is my actual damage? I hope there's no guessing like what's multiplicative, what's additive. At the end of the day, honestly, if you hover over an item and you see like an up arrow, at least at its most basic level, right? Like you're going to get more attack. That's probably the easiest way to like understand and play a game. Like that makes sense. But it's kind of a double-edged sword because you look at like Path of Exile, and you've got like 6 affixes on an item, and So Path of Exile couldn't just show you like an up arrow, like this is going to give you more damage, because that wouldn't be really taking everything into consideration, like resistances, life pool. Is it actually going to give you more damage? At what cost? But also at the same time, that's some of the fun of, Path of Exile, for example, is being able to look at an item and over time start to learn like, okay, wow, that is a really good item for me. I understand my character and I know that, for example, this ring has more poison damage, so that's really good for me. So you wouldn't necessarily need the game to tell you, okay, it gives you plus, 5 attack or minus 15 defense. You eventually learn what's good for you. And that might not necessarily be a flat thing across all characters, right? Like, I'm doing poison chaos damage in PoE, or I need corpse lance damage in Diablo 3. I eventually get to the point where I don't need a plus or minus on my character's damage to know whether or not an item's an upgrade. And again, that goes back to my argument of like rely on the content creators to explain complex mechanics. They're also kind of showcasing the first time of what this angelic, demonic, and ancestral power really look like on the character sheet. And so to me, this kind of sends a message of, yeah, we feel like the feedback was good, and so we're going forward with the angelic, demonic, and ancestral power idea. And while I think that the feedback was overwhelmingly, angelic, demonic, ancestral power was better than what you guys had originally, I think that the overwhelming response from the community was, it's better than what you had originally because what you had originally wasn't very good. So this was a step in the right direction, angelic, demonic, and ancestral power. But I don't think that this is enough still. And so I definitely hope that, they're not locking themselves into any kind of UI because they think that this is the play. And to further kind of drive that home, further in the post, they talk about how the UI should feel on a controller. And again, there are people out there that, think if they design a game for the controller, it's going to make it, less hardcore because there's only so much that a controller can do. But again, I don't necessarily think that's true. I just don't think that we've ever seen it. Like, we've never seen a game be able to do it successfully. And I'm hopeful that Blizzard will figure out a way that they won't have to dumb the game down just to make it playable for console. I'm confident that Blizzard could do it if anyone could do it. I just worry that maybe they're not. And why I think that is because they talk about couch co-op. And what couch co-op is for people to play on console. If they have multiple people playing together in a party, sitting on the couch together, playing the game, they want it to be easier for them to, inventory manage and change their skills and stuff like that without it affecting everyone that's sitting on the couch. And while I think that this is, I guess, somewhat smart to consider, I don't think that Blizzard's in a place to be considering this yet, right? And so this is your kind of third worldwide release of information. And you're already talking about how design decisions such as couch co-op are being considered. And so my immediate reaction, I'm a developer. I'm not trying to armchair develop right now. I'm just a developer. And to me, it feels very early in the development process to be talking about, a very niche type of situation, right? To me, I think, the focus should be like, let's make the best game we can. Let's make skills and our skill tree like this crazy awesome thing that people love. And then when we have like 2 months left, we'll really worry about how this game plays when you have two people sitting on a couch together. And so my fear is that this is a design restraint, right? And so what I mean by that is they have to design talents and skills in such a way that's manageable by couch co-op, which is a completely backwards way of designing a game. Like, you look at, Path of Exile is this great game, and it's on the console. Is it a great experience? I don't really know. I can't imagine that managing your passive tree and all your inventory, and it's a very consumable, heavy game. I can't imagine that that's like a great experience, but people do it because it's such a good game, right? And I think that's the play, right? Like, make a game that's so good that people want to play it instead of making a game just feel good on the console and then kind of inherently screwing over the diehard fans because there's no depth. Right, and so we get a sneak peek again. It looks like they've kind of touched on the skill tree since BlizzCon. It doesn't look the same as it isn't BlizzCon. I kind of got the impression at BlizzCon that they showed us the skill tree just to like show us what they were thinking. But again, these are very linear. There's not a lot of choice happening here because it's manageable. Taking up not even half your screen is couch co-op. the reason we have skill twigs, right? Is that a design restraint? I don't know. Again, it just feels very strange. I think it sends a weird message to be talking about couch co-op so early in the development process, right? Because you get this like huge timeline of stuff you should be working on, like getting itemization right and making encounters feel good and boss fights feel impactful and spells be really cool and all the legendaries you have to add to the game to make it feel really cool and great. And there's just so many things to focus on in this huge timeline that like couch co-op, like just do that at the end when you're sure the game is really, really good and in a good place. Don't like think about couch co-op now and be like, oh no, we can't do that because it won't work for those players who like to play on the couch. And we do have a survey, guys. Listen, we have a survey down below. I want you guys to fill out, right? It's just how many hours have you played Diablo? How many of those hours have you spent playing couch co-op? So far we have almost 500 votes, and it seems like a very small percentage of people have either even played couch co-op or haven't really excessively played couch co-op. But you guys can prove me wrong. This is the data I want to see. So while I think that, yeah, okay, something like this is important, there's going to be players out there that really want couch co-op. I just don't know that it should be part of the design decisions happening so early in development. And that's what scares me. And that's why I bring it up. They also go on to talk about how, you know, in the beta, the skills were on the bottom left, which I will say as a Diablo player, it felt very weird. It wasn't like, wow, this is unplayable for me, but it's just like, oh, that's an interesting decision. Like I was looking down in the bottom left with my peripherals, like they talk about here, which is pretty cool. Like having it at the bottom left, you're constantly like looking bottom left instead of looking kind of straight on like you would. But the cool thing about this is like both will be an option. So if you want it in the bottom left, you're going to be able to do that. You want it in the bottom middle, great. I think that that's really cool. And I hope they actually add even more customization options to the UI, like maybe bottom right. Maybe you can drag and drop all of your UI elements to be wherever you want on the screen. That'd be pretty cool. I know people have always wanted that in Diablo 3. But again, you know, from these screenshots, I kind of feel like they're also, you know, locking more into, there's only 4 skills. The left click, the right click, and then the 4 skills that you're going to have access to, plus the health potion, the 1 health potion. And again, in the gameplay, we see like the big cooldowns. You know, in the demo, there were these like 2-minute cooldowns. And so like while you only have 4 skills plus right and left click, you know, there's just a lot of downtime that you spend maybe just spamming your primary attack. And, you know, while Diablo 4, the combat is slower paced and it's more methodical, and I think that that's their intent, it's definitely not fun to just like spam your left click because everything is on cooldown. And I'm not of the opinion that cooldown doesn't work. So you look at games like Lost Ark, your skills have cooldowns and you've got 8 different skills, but they all interact with each other in such a way. So like maybe one of your skills will knock the enemies down and then the next one like knocks them in the air if they're already knocked down or whatever, right? Like that, there's combos that happen. And by the time you're kind of finished with your rotations, things are coming back off cooldown. And plus you're like dodging abilities from the monsters. And of course that, you know, also is factored into that cooldown. And it never really feels like you're just kind of sitting there. In the demo, it definitely did. You just sit there and you'd be spamming the main attack, trying to get resource back. So, you know, they're asking in this post, like, what do we want to see more of? To me, you know, the skills felt very much like Diablo 3 remastered. There wasn't a lot of exciting stuff. I think, you know, the Druid felt great because we haven't played the Druid since Diablo 2. But the Barb and the Wizard were just like kind of reskinned skills from Diablo 3 and didn't feel very exciting. So I would love to see more talking about skills, you know, what their idea is for skills. I know their current plan is, you know, basically the end game goal is to have a legendary in every slot. With the itemization post, they talked about how you're going to be able to add a legendary effect to every rare, effectively making just like a really good legendary item that's customizable. But your goal is to have legendaries in every slot in Diablo 4's current form. And I just don't think that that's the right play. And it's kind of funny because players talk about how like they don't want sets. We don't want sets in the next iteration of Diablo. But if your play style is forcing you to put a very specific legendary effect in every slot, what do you think that is? That's a game forcing you into a set. That's a game forcing you into a play style. If you want to build your character around like Meteor, chances are there's going to be a best legendary effect for every one of your slots. But then you look at a game like PoE, I know what would be the perfect weapon for me. I know, because I've done enough of my research and I've played enough with path building that I know, if I got these 6 stats on my weapon, like that would be the best. But the probability of me getting like 6 T1 rolls of exactly what I want ever is just like, it's so slim. And so there's that constant drive and that constant feeling of progression of I really want to get there. Whereas in Diablo 3, I get ancients in every slot, and then I get those ancients augmented to get more main stat, and then I'm just farming more main stat, and then I'm basically chasing, maybe 1% upgrades. Like if I got a primal pair of pestilent shoulders on this character, how much of an upgrade is that going to be? That's going to give me like 28 more intelligence. That's what I'm chasing. Whereas in Path of Exile, I've got a T4 hunter prefix, and if I got a T1, which again, that would probably never happen because I got a lot of T1s on this thing, that would be a huge upgrade. But the probability of me ever getting that is very low. But that lust for the perfect gear keeps you going, and it just doesn't appear that that's going to be the case with Diablo 4 from everything we've seen and everything we've read. So again, if you're asking me, I want to see them talk about more about itemizations. I don't want to see them go forward with attack, defense, and these angelic, demonic, ancestral powers. I don't think it goes far enough. I want to see a lot more updates in that category. I want to see what they're thinking with the skill tree. Right now, they're skill twigs, and it seems like they're kind of locking those in because they want it to be great for couch co-op. I think that's a big red flag. I don't think that these are good enough at all to go forward with. Not complex enough at all. One of the things we talk about all the time is we talk about this kind of spectrum of ARPG players, and you've got your hardcore players over here, your PoE players, and you've got your Diablo 3 players over here, which are more casual, right? So you've got this casual versus hardcore spectrum. Now, we've seen PoE 2, right? And it looks to be a great game. I'm very excited for it. But PoE 2 is sort of just doubling down on this player base, right? These hardcore ARPG players. So all these guys on this side of the spectrum are probably never going to get into it. So there's all this middle ground of uncharted territory. And to me, the natural progression would have been for Diablo 4 to try to kind of move into the space, maybe step up their game, maybe make it a little bit more challenging, maybe more in depth than how kind of really basic Diablo 3 was. Now, I do still think PoE 2 could go in that direction by making things just more user friendly or explaining things better. But PoE is also crushing it, so they can do whatever they want. But to me, Diablo 4 went the other way, right? Diablo 4 in its current form is even more simple than Diablo 3, even more simple than Diablo Immortal. I hate saying that out loud. So to me, there's still so much work to do in terms of itemization, in terms of the skill twigs, in terms of the skills themselves and how they even function, them being, big cooldowns, and you only have 6 of them. It just doesn't work, and it's going to feel bad. The game, I couldn't be happier with how the game looks. I'm so excited. It's just dark and gritty, and it feels like Diablo. But in its current form, it feels like Diablo 3, but even more dumbed down. And I'm just terrified of them continuing down this path. And that's my feedback. That they're asking for feedback. I'm here giving it to them. Maybe it's overly critical, but at the end of the day, it's my feedback. I want Diablo 4 to be the best game possible, and I just don't feel they're on that path right now, and it scares me. But, maybe I'm wrong, right? Like maybe couch co-op is the future of gaming. But let me know what you guys think of all these pieces of information in the comment section below. I do read those. I do reply to those. I do see all of them, and I'm genuinely curious exactly what you guys think. Make sure you fill out the poll in the comment section below as well. The more data we have, the better. Of course, guys, like, subscribe. We'll be posting these updates as soon as they're out and breaking them down for you guys as best we can. But that's going to do it for the video, guys. As always, like, subscribe, come over to Twitch, ask your questions. We love you guys. Peace out.